Hello, Internet. Thank you so much for joining us for Crafted Future Code That Scales. I'm Nick Bornstein, General Manager of the Webby Awards, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's event. Hosted in partnership with our friends at WP Engine, this session is part of our Crafted Future series, which celebrates how brands, agencies, and designers are merging creativity, engineering, and strategy to build the Internet's most innovative experiences. You know, in a digital world defined by constant change, the most successful teams don't just adapt, they are building for what's next. And Crafted Future Code That Scales is really a discussion on how leading agencies and brands are rethinking architecture for the AI era. Today's conversation will explore how teams are turning AI into their creative advantage. They're designing intelligent systems that scale with ambition. They're balancing agility with growth and transforming workflows to really move at the speed of culture, which we'll talk about soon. But together, we'll uncover how these designers and technology leaders are really harnessing this technological moment to deepen insights, drive strategy, and redefine innovation. So alongside today's event, we're also debuting the new season of Crafted with Code videos. They are now live on WP Engine's YouTube channel and website. The series has spotlighted the designers, developers, and innovators behind Webby recognized projects, some of whom are here today, that really embody this blend of creativity and technology that we recognize at the Webby Awards. We'll also share those links in the chat, so you can definitely explore their stories after the discussion. And of course, for anyone who's joining today and making great work on the internet, a quick note that the Webby Awards final entry deadline is coming up on December 19th. So if you're working on projects that really push the internet forward, like a lot of the folks here today have done, we'd love to see them in the mix this season. And again, we'll drop a link there in the chat. So without further ado, I am delighted, super thrilled to introduce our panelists for Crafted Future Code That Scales. Please join me in welcoming Cosme Olivas, a full stack developer and designer at Matchbox Studio. Hello, Cosme.
How's it going?
I'd love to also welcome Amori Langstaff, VP of Marketing, Technology, and Operations at WP Engine.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. And finally, Katie Penninger, the VP of Account Service and Business Growth at Lewis.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I think to kick things off, I'd love to hear more about each of your work and how each of you is really approaching this moment, this sort of intersection of AI and scalable growth in your role. Maybe Katie, why don't we start with you? How are you approaching this moment in time when it comes to the work that you do? And tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I lead account service and business growth. So a lot of my focus is always on the people. Obviously, I think, people first approach, and how I look at AI is, how does it help our teams work smarter so that we have more time to be able to focus on the parts of the job that I think really matter. I think it's so exciting to see how I think there are so many things being streamlined and being able to be done in a more efficient way that I think allows us to have more time to think more deeply, to concentrate on how we're really partnering more closely with our clients, and then ultimately, how are we making even stronger creative decisions by the tools that we're able to use that just helps make everything we're doing smarter.
Oh, great. Well, beautiful transition in terms of creative decisions. We have Cosme with us, who is a web developer and deep in the creative processes. Tell us a little bit more about your work at Matchbox and sort of how you're approaching this intersection of AI and creativity.
I think Katie actually said something that really has thinking more deeply. And I think that's kind of with AI, you're able to kind of really just let it take care of a lot of the smaller tasks that just take up a lot of time. So that way you can just think more about the solutions and more about how to improve workflows, and just think deeply about what you're doing and let AI handle a lot of the smaller tasks.
Well, that also leads pretty well to, I know you guys didn't all plan this, but Amori, you are constantly thinking about solutions, certainly for the WPN community, but tell us a little bit more about your role and your approach.
Yeah, so over the last year, I've taken over a practice area around MarTech, around digital experiences, and around campaign operations. So let's say it's an operational function, it's a shared service supporting nearly 80 marketers. So the biggest thing that I'm really focusing on is there are to audiences. So if I think about the website particularly, and we're going through a redesign of our site, we're calling the project the Intelligent Web, right? And so it used to be, we used to call it, I don't know, well, we also call it 4.0, so let's just say 4.0. But the biggest thing that is so interesting to me is that we have to like design and think about these two types of intelligence, kind of concurrently. And so when I think about like, what are we building, what scalability means to me, it's like, we want something that actually serves both of these things and serves it seamlessly, right? So design matters. Like, we're always designing for people. It's super important. But now we're starting to think about, like, we're just re-architecting our taxonomy. First, it was like, okay, how does taxonomy serve people to get great content in front of them and, make the experience more dynamic? But we're also serving this taxonomy in a structured way to LLMs and other things.
Yeah.
And what do we want back from that, right? We want them to have a more accurate readback of what we're doing. So this just concept of like, there are now these two amazing stakeholders that we have to think about. But we also have marketers who are like, we want better data. We want to make sure that we can get cleaner analytics. We can do all of those things, right? And that's where AI is really helping us. We just had to redo and audit all our content, thousands of pieces of content. And we designed an LLM to do it and to tag it and understand, how this new taxonomy could be interpreted. Like, that's such an unlock. It would have taken weeks before.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because today's conversation is really about code that scales, right? How are you all scaling your businesses, the work that you do with clients? I think, Omori, you talked a lot about sort of what that means to you, but similarly, Katie, I mean, when I say code that scales, or when you think about how you're scaling with clients, whether that's the systems, the teams, the ideas that are growing, I mean, what does that mean to you, this idea of scaling in 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's changing so fast, as we all know. So I think one of the most important things is making sure that, every system that we are building, every team that we are building and growing, that we're building both of those in a way that can adapt quickly. Because I feel like we're all feeling this, what was true sometimes even yesterday is not true today, because it's changing so fast. So, I think it's, making sure we're not doing more just for the sake of doing more, but really using the tools in a way that helps us work smarter. And that's everything from understanding audiences better, creating experiences that can evolve in real time, which I think, there's so much that we can do in real time that was not possible before, which I think is so exciting. So I think the adaptability and being able to evolve quickly is the scale that right now is going to last longer.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, so beautifully said. Cosme, do you sort of see it in a similar way, certainly from the development and design side? I mean, how are you thinking about scaling? What does that mean to you in 2025?
For me, scaling is a lot about the foundation, just like having a strong, flexible core. And whether that's, code, like a code base, a framework, or design principles, like if you have that core foundation, you'll be able to scale that in any way. And now with AI, you got all the possibilities, like ideas, capabilities. If you have that strong core foundation, you can scale however, many ways.
Well, and I'm surprised in our 10 minutes, we haven't yet used the word efficiency. I think efficiency is sort of the word du jour, but I think we all work in an industry where innovation is moving really fast. And I think efficiency, while really wonderful in some ways, can also sometimes come at the cost of craft. I know that's a conversation that's happening a lot in our communities. And maybe, Cosme, I'll start with you. How are you balancing the pressure to adapt to AI quickly while still maintaining creative excellence and still maintaining your sort of creative vision?
I think it's just like picking your battles. You got to really assess how much time is going to be invested, and when you're going to do something, kind of narrow the scope, kind of break it down into smaller parts, and then deciding where you're going to go and like what's going to take more time, and then where can you invest more. And then just, as much as you want to scale up, you also scale down. And when you scale down, that's, AI can help with that as well. So it's not just up, it's also down.
Amori, same question for you. I'm really curious sort of what you're seeing in your landscape and sort of that pressure to adapt. And you are doing so much in AI. You've been doing a lot in AI, but how are you sort of messaging or recommending folks who are on the platform consider maintaining excellence while trying these new technologies?
I mean, to me, like the biggest unlock of AI is it's fundamentally like it's a learning system, right? And so when I think about that, like as a philosophy, one of the things that we're doing is we're talking to tons of our customers, prospects, and our current customers, right? I'm lucky enough to build a site with so many people who are building amazing sites, right? So we've been doing so much research. The one thing that I would say is like, it's not just about tools. There are tons of little widgets that are going to, I don't know, make some kind of mini marvelous experience. When I think about like, how do we unlock it and what it means and what brands have told me and folks that are building great sites have said, which is, let's not think about like, what is the new bright, shiny thing? Like, what is the like amazing unlock that AI can do? And I use this example, which is just asking ourselves constantly, it's not, what tool can I just put on top of this experience, but like what process or experience can we make smarter with a learning system, period, right? And so it used to be in the old days, those were algorithms and machine algorithms. Now it's AI. But at the end of the day, learning systems, like what is the learning system? So when I think about, for instance, a chatbot, and we just like offloaded our existing sort of very basic chatbot. And instead of just saying, hey, we want another chatbot on the site, one of the things I really sort of think about is like, we want to just change the story. We want a conversational interface. I want to have it do more. I want it to watch. I want it to learn. I want it to greet people. I want to have this conversational narrative layer on the site, right? Of course, it's an AI tool. He's very nice. Walter, say hi to him when you come to WP Engine. We're training him and we want to do this. But the funny thing about it is he's not just sitting on top of our site. The questions I'm asking my team are, how do we actually make the site interact with Walter directly so that the things that are happening in this conversational interface mean something in the entire layer, right? So this, again, going back to this learning system, which is all of these surfaces ideally should learn from each other. It's a beautiful product. You know, I'm really happy with it, but I can't have one beautiful product on top of a surface that does not do all the things, right? And that is the real, I think, premise for me, which is AI is like, you have to think about it systemically, not as like a widget or a tool primarily.
Yes. I also, by the way, I'm going to quote mini marvelous experience. I think the mini marvelousness is something to really consider, right? Marvelousness can happen at many different stages. You know, Katie, you have a lot of experience leading teams at Lewis and work a lot with clients. And I'm curious how AI has changed what clients are expecting from their agency partners.
Yeah, you know, I think we've been seeing I think the desire for speed coming for a long time, but I think this has definitely expedited that in an even bigger way. And I think it's about speed and strategic depth, you know, together happening simultaneously. You know, clients wanting faster answers, more options, more insights. But I also think there's a real opportunity for us as we are all leaders in you know, working with these tools, learning these tools to help bring clarity for our clients, because it's a noisy space. And so, I think in some ways AI has made our role as being those, I think, strategic filters even more essential right now. So I think it's bringing a lot of good opportunity.
Absolutely. Understatement of the year, noisy space, but it's absolutely right. You know, I'm curious at Matchbox Studio, Cosme, how has AI shaped your creative process?
I think it's just, I don't know how to like answer that, because AI really, I think, has just helped develop the creative ideas faster. You know, so now because we can do it faster, we can do a little bit more, explore a little bit more ideas, any kind of like interaction that we want to do. We have more time to really execute that and to have proof of concept and just explore all the fun things. So that's really just kind of, it's given us more opportunity just to extend our capabilities.
Yeah. And Amora, you mentioned this a little bit, but you see so many creatives, developers, agencies, brands kind of transforming their stack with AI. And you talked a little bit about this with Walter, but what do you think is distinguishing teams or even individuals who are building strategy around AI versus maybe just using it as an add-on? Like, how important is it to integrate across the full stack?
Yeah, I mean, it's so key. So obviously I said, I kind of lead up MarTech. One of the things that's really important to know, it's like every modern company has a ton of stack stuff. That's systems, that's this, there's that, right? The one thing that I have to be really intentional about is that you have to, just the complexity and just the amount of stack itself is a barrier to innovation, especially with AI, right? Because what you don't want to end up with is just more stuff, more tools that work very locally. Like one of the things that I'm always thinking deeply about is, right, should we use things like co-pilots, right, that are very shallow, but really just kind of deepen the stack they're in? No, what I really am trying to think about is like, how do we have the capability to build something? My team will laugh when they hear me say this, a tool of tools, which is something that is kind of like the MCP for CRM, right? The one that we actually push stuff into an intelligent layer. But there are a few things that I, as a leader, need to do, which is we have to simplify all of these technology decisions, right? They must be so essentially grounded in the job that they need to be done, because it's very, very easily to build fractional solutions. And honestly, just AI just looks so damn good. Like you just want to have it. You want to have all the things. And so what is really kind of just an act of discipline, not just, fiscal discipline, but also understanding that people can learn so much, right? And they can't become experts and they can't unlock possibilities. And so being really intentional of like, where does AI sit? And there's some things it could be a co-pilot, or do we need to build our own agents, which we're doing. But more importantly, coming back to this idea of like scalability for an organization, scalability for any business comes from, I think, maximizing the value of anything. And I think that's where we can start to think about AI in a different way, which is not, it's separate and additive, but more of it's like, can it be a force multiplier, right? And we see this with things like data and stuff like that, but it really hasn't gotten to the nitty gritty of how real companies work or how a real marketing team works, where you're like, I have a thing, I need to pass it to another person. Like, I want to see AI sitting on top of that orchestration layer and the workflow layer to truly unlock meaningful, growth for all of us.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit, sort of, Katie, what you're talking about, being that sort of strategic filter. I'm sure a lot of this resonates with some of the work that you're doing in filtering for clients, like when, how, and where to use these tools.
It definitely does, because there's so many out there that if you're only looking at it through one lens, I think you can either end up with so many things that nobody even knows where to start, versus everybody making sure they're really looking at it all the way around to find the best solutions that fit more holistically for an agency, for an organization. I think that's so critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're very excited to be hosting this conversation also because Cosme and Katie, we were thrilled to recognize your projects at the Webby Awards last season. It is also work that is going to be featured in this season of Crafted with Code. So please check out a deeper dive into their work. But I thought I would share a little bit from both of your projects and talk a little bit about them a little bit deeper. Cosme, you worked on Gelato La Boca, which is a Webby winner in our website and mobile sites categories for food and drink. A site that I absolutely adore. I think you brought the sort of vibrant spirit of Buenos Aires and sort of the La Boca neighborhood to this immersive and sort of efficient digital experience. And Katie, your team worked on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail experience, which was a People's Voice winner in our travel and lifestyle categories. I think it sort of modernized the brand with really flexible and visitor-friendly platforms. It made the trip planning really clear. Unfortunately, we wish we could give everyone in our audience today free bourbon and gelato, but please feel free to link up with Cosme and Katie, and maybe they'll hook you up. But let's go ahead and take a quick look at both and then talk about them. such beautiful experiences. And I highly recommend everyone here today click around the sites. I think it'll be really exciting to hear sort of what these leaders are talking about, but also to see them in action. But, first starting, Cosme, with you, I think you did just such a stunning piece of work. We all really, really admired it at the Webbies. And I think it's a really interesting case study of sort of harmonizing craft, but also something that is really efficient, right? And I'd love to maybe just start with telling us a little bit more about how you developed the experience.
Well, like the experience, there's a lot of like interactivity and animation that goes along with it. And a big part of delivering that experience is not just on desktop, but also on mobile. And so one of the biggest challenges is having an optimized and beautiful experience and functional, accessible, both on desktop and on mobile. And so really just kind of always taking that into like consideration, like using AI kind of helps scale down and scale up and explore new, avenues of still delivering that brand experience and having the same one on mobile and desktops.
Well, and you mentioned AI sort of factoring into this, but I think something that you all mentioned was how you also worked with a lean budget, candidly, and you still delivered an experience that really felt super rich and immersive. How did you think about scale in that context? Obviously building something that was really creatively ambitious, but operationally sustainable, sort of within your means as well.
It all comes down to just kind of, what is possible. One of the biggest things is like working with videos and animating that, and like really when you're working with a tight budget, you've got to, pump it out faster. And so exploring and just kind of scaling it down, but still delivering that's really what it comes down to.
Was AI a big factor in that? Did that help sort of
during that time? No, like during that time, like AI wasn't at where I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And so, but I will say like one thing that's happened is now kind of in today, some of the sites I'm working on, it's easier to do it than it was before. But back then it was a lot harder to kind of execute some of those things.
Sure. Scrappier experience, perhaps.
Right. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Really, really lovely site. Katie, I also want to celebrate you and your team at Lewis for this awesome Kentucky Bourbon Trail experience. I actually didn't know much about the Bourbon Trail, and now I feel like I do and kind of can engage with the experience because of your website. I think it also really combines storytelling and scale beautifully. Can you tell us a little bit more maybe about the origins and maybe the strategy for developing your experience?
Sure. Well, thank you. It was such a huge opportunity because just like you're saying, so many people really don't understand what the Kentucky Bourbon Trail is, what Kentucky has to offer. So there was a lot there to digest. And just like Cosme was saying, we built this a year ago. AI wasn't what it was now, and isn't it funny when we're sitting here saying back then, and we're not talking about that long, that's how rapidly it's changing. But I think we were still able to use it in ways to help us just really organize a ton of content and audience inputs that helped us make clearer decisions, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with more than 50 distilleries and their information, and how are we helping people plan a more informed trip? So there was a lot to digest there. But I think, and Cosme, I think you touched on this earlier too, back to that foundation. I think that's a core principle in everything that we're doing, is how are we making sure that we're building the right foundation that can truly evolve and scale, not just with technology, but in this case with the Bourbon Trail, because it's continuing to grow and change every day, just like everything else. So,
goodness, 50 clients. That is an amazing remit. But, I love how you also described the site growing with the Bourbon Trail. Like, I think that sort of alignment of how you not just making it for them, but sort of helping to grow that experience. When you think about scale in that sense, what does site, success look like beyond traffic in metrics? How are you defining meaningful growth for the client and their audience?
Yeah, it's so much learning that happened during discovery that informed how we were thinking about this site. Because again, you've got this internal audience, you've got the distilleries, and then you've got visitors coming that have no awareness of what they have in store. And so we realized, we really have to build something that allows people to experience Kentucky in a more intentional and meaningful way, and help visitors discover that there's so much more that they didn't even know existed. There's unexpected experiences. And I think that allows the distilleries to then welcome a more educated guest, which helps them, because we heard so much about, we have people show up and they don't understand. You can't just show up without having something booked. There were a lot of operational challenges that we said, okay, how can we use this to not only help the visitor, but also help the distilleries? So helping people arrive, more informed. So I think that is a huge major measure of success for us, is when a distillery says we're starting to see people have a better understanding of how to get around Kentucky, what they need to expect before they even come, how they need to plan their trip. I think that's a big way that we measure success for this.
Yeah. Well, and both experiences were hosted on WP Engine, which is amazing, and sort of bringing your POV more into it. How are you finding that WP Engine can sort of support projects like this at scale? Are there sort of, we've all talked about foundation, but, are there sort of foundational elements that need to be in place technically and strategically to make the great work like these two projects happen?
So I will say that I'm in the lucky advantage of being able to take advantage of not having to think about it very much, but I do have to think about it, right? Because there is a intersection between what my team has to do, which is to build sites, maintain them, optimize them. I can count on my two hands, like how big the team is. But we manage over 20 installs. So we are like a small agency of sorts, right? So my problems are everybody's problems. And obviously I can be a demanding customer. Yes, I have phoned a friend many a time. To really think about this. So for me, like, there are two things, which is, this is a very big piece of work, right? We don't have just WPEngine.com. We have transacting sites. We have content sites. I have an intranet. I have, local and all of these other things. So nothing is really like for like. So there are two things that I expect. One is we're going to have the kind of solution that is bespoke for each site, but well understandable enough so that we can maintain it at scale, and we can have things like the same practices for CI/CD. We can have dev and stage environments that, are really reliable. But there are a few things that like everybody is going to need, and I need the same thing, because when something goes wrong with the site, people like flag and page me or my team. And so from that perspective, here's what I expect. And I think it's more than table stakes, I think. I need global edge delivery, right? So everything is really changing. It's like when you think about things like traffic, like 60% of all the traffic that's coming to our sites is like bots now, right? So how do you even understand that? So you really need good understanding of like what scale really means, right? So that's one thing. Our ecosystems need caching, like protection from traffic spikes, all of the things that you and your clients experience. Me and my team does it, right? But we're building and we're maintaining our sites on our platform. And so the other things that I need from a delivery perspective that really hardens this is things like fast rollbacks and automated testing. We're using AI to do automated testing. We're using we want to have great accessibility. So we're using a lot of tools in that space. And that's really been a huge unlock, not necessarily just for the infrastructure, but like, how does a team of this size, which is 10 people, and I'm at strength right now, so it used to be less, really do this across an ecosystem when there's so much to manage, and we would not be able to scale successfully. And then the last part is like, I need to be on a system and a platform that allows me to do new and interesting things. I talked about this, like the idea of like an MCP, right? We want to have great search. We want to be able to federate our structures and our data to LLMs and learning systems. I don't want to have to build that myself, right? We don't have the time. We certainly don't have the resources. But every single site needs something somewhat differently, right? So it's a combination of something that can support great specificity, but also can be generalized into efficient workflows. Yeah.
Well, and so much of what we're talking about today is this idea of speed. And I think there are so many reasons why we all have to work faster and sort of be thoughtful about building these digital experiences that are quick and meet culture where they are. You know, the Webby Awards are really an award that celebrates digital culture as well as the technical experiences behind them. And I think what we've all experienced is that culture moves faster than ever. And, you know, this idea of moving sort of at the speed of culture, which is really fast, is paramount for a lot of brands and clients and just consumers. Cosme, you know, I'm curious how you are thinking about creating digital experiences that are adaptive in real time and sort of still stay true to the brands and the clients that you work with. Do you have any recommendations for how developers or designers or agencies might consider developing these digital experiences that are moving at the speed of culture?
Yeah, I mean, everything's moving so fast now, and a lot of products are updating faster. And so in order to kind of just keep up with the speed, I think you just got to surround yourself with people that are also looking into everything. So you're not alone in kind of looking at all these solutions. You're working with other people, asking them what they're working on. You work on something else, you share ideas, you just kind of keep that dialogue going in the community, and just have other people that are also passionate about learning, researching, and kind of looking at all the different ways to kind of make, everything more efficient, faster. And like that together, you're able to kind of progress a lot faster and keep up with everything that's coming out, and just having more people around you that are doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and Katie, you're working with a whole slew of different clients. I mean, you work with everyone from like emerging startups to national organizations. Do you find scaling strategies really differ across that spectrum? I imagine depending on the client, but are you finding sort of the spectrum quite different?
You know, I think it is in some ways. And, I think the other side of it is I think it's kind of leveling the playing field in a lot of ways, because I think, for startups and smaller clients who maybe were hindered at one point by budgets or, size of teams, I think AI is opening a whole new world for them to be able to do things that they couldn't do before. And I think for larger organizations, I think it's helping them untangle the complexity in a lot of ways. So, I think it's giving both such incredible access to things to really help their businesses grow. And I do think different sizes, different, needs, they're using it in different ways, but at the same time, I think it's bringing a lot of the same access to both.
Sure. Yeah, it's a democratization in some ways.
Yeah.
I do want to get sort of tactical for a bit, because I think a lot of our community would be curious about how you're all actually using this technology, but how are people sort of actually embedding AI into their workflows and operations to scale? Amori, we've talked a lot about this, but do you think there are any technical challenges that teams need to address before they can scale with AI? Like, what do we sort of need to be thinking about base level?
I mean, the hard bits have always been the hard bits, which is it's junk in, junk out, right? That is the fundamental failure across the board. So for me, when I think about like, what will we need to have happen, within our own organization, which is how do we ensure that we can get great high quality inputs? I talked a little bit about like, we're re-architecting our site, working on taxonomy. That's a great way to do it, which is, AI feels kind of magical, but I don't think the fundamentals of any data-based system are different. Like the integrity of the data needs to be great. It needs to be structured in a certain way. We need to not be shortcutting this idea of like how to use it in change management, right? So AI may be novel, or the application or the interface may be novel, but the fundamental problems of like being in an organization where you may have a lot of data, how do you make use of it, right? So I'd say as a team, like we are going, especially as a marketing team, we went from 0 to 5, let's say if 10 is like a sci-fi movie. We went from 0 to 5 in terms of our usage and our deployment of it. But we're kind of plateauing, because of those structural issues where we are saying now we need to see, so sorry, now we need to see what do we need to really create in terms of workflow enablers, not just single task enablers with AI, right? So the technical quality here is, okay, I want to see metrics that go from an idea all the way to execution, all the way to optimization. And it's like I have a layer that sits on top of it that helps me understand it from a workflow perspective.
Yeah.
And so that to me feels like the biggest unlock, which is as we have to build, and we talked about the fact that the tools have changed a lot in a year. I can't even imagine what 2026 is going to look like, right? So maybe it's like all of these structural deficiencies we see now, things like, oh, it can't ingest like unclean data, or you have to do a lot of ways to structure it. Maybe those things will be solved. But I would say, the biggest thing we need to think about as we're building today is the foundations need to be rock solid. And I think, Cosme, you said this, right? The foundational stuff needs to be rock solid because that will allow us to be nimble when things do change.
Yeah. Do you think, Katie, that there are certain places where agencies or maybe even individuals should be focusing their AI investments right now, like especially with regards to real business growth?
Yeah, I think any way people can focus on how to automate those repetitive tasks and those things, like we were talking about earlier, things that allow the freedom of time to think deeper and think more creatively. I think that's one area. I think, investing in how to get to insights faster, and also how to organize the knowledge that we all have. Like, in our case, it's for our clients. How do we organize all the research, the briefs, the brand history to be able to utilize that information in such a faster way than we ever could before, that I think is actually usable. I think those are some main areas that'll create an impact right now.
Yeah. And Cosme, from your side of the house, are there any AI tools or systems that have become almost indispensable in your work, or any sort of recommendations you might give for the work that you're doing? It's actually really interesting to think about sort of obviously Jalala Boca and the Kentucky Bourbon Trail as being sites that were built a year ago and maybe didn't have the tech to support it. But from your perspective as a web developer, Cosme, are there tools that have been invaluable to what you're working on today?
I don't know, because I fight a lot with AI. So in my coding, like I'm always in an argument trying to, so, but I think the biggest benefit has really been like, we had Google before, right? We have the internet and accessing it and you type it in, but now it's faster and you're getting a lot more. So really, I mean, just in general, the very basic of it is just access to more information. I think that's been very, invaluable overall.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'm curious to hear more about your fights, because I think that's a very fair experience, right? We are touring a Webby Talk right now, which is sort of our thought leadership program about how do you build trust when using AI on the internet and in different experiences. And we hear from a lot of community that while AI can be a great tool, there's also a lot of frustration around it. And maybe just to go a little bit deeper, Cosme, how do those frustrations maybe lead you to better work, or maybe kind of invest more in your vision? Can you tell us a little window?
It's definitely changed how I just work with it. It's just, I don't work in big kind of like tasks, like big ideas. It's very direct on what I needed to do, being more descriptive about what the problems are, the issues are, what I'm trying to achieve, but also keeping like the scope very small. Because if I try to give it something a little bit more creative in thinking, we're going to have fights. We always do.
Can I ask what sort of platforms are most useful to you, or you've been sort of experimenting more with?
I've been mainly working with Claude.
Sure.
In using the VS Code. And so I just work on Claude. I've also integrated Copilot and GitHub with, their Copilot system. So those are the main tools I've been using. But Claude and I are, that's my, that's my guy. Yeah.
Amori, I'm actually curious to ask you, you've talked a little about Walter and some of the WP Engine tech stack, but what are sort of you finding useful in the work that you're doing with clients from an AI product standpoint?
I mean, we're kind of a builder practice within marketing, for instance, right? So not only are we building websites, but my marketing operations team is also bringing things like scalable automation and all of the ways we do it. So from a practical experience, I'll give you an example. Like I run a operations team that kind of oversees all our marketing stack. As you can imagine, we have a lot of customers and therefore they need a lot of help and help desk stuff. So one of the things that we're building, is a MOPS bot, which is our own conversational interface that, and we built it, kind of using Vertex and GCP to basically this knowledge base. Like, Katie, you were saying this, like, how do you put all the knowledge together? Because it was before, it's like people ask you questions and you're like, can you just Google that? And now it's like, okay, now we want to actually create that knowledge base. So we're building this MOPS bot for two reasons. One is when you talk about the kind of the speed of culture, which is people just want answers faster. And, it's like, hey, you put in something in Slack and you're like, I'll get an answer in 2 hours. Like it used to be a hope that you would get a fast answer. Now it's like an expectation that everybody has, like they want a faster answer, right? So even as we think about deploying not just operational stuff, like to build different things, but how do we transform ourselves? So it's been really important to kind of just even look internally and see what do we really need to do and offload some of those things. I think we're going to fight with, our information, like how to present it and all of those, same challenges. But I love the idea of how practical it can be if you can get really tight with the problem you want to solve. Right. And so Cosmo, you talked like, I don't use it for everything. For me, it's like I start my day and it's like, gets me a quick start when I have writer's block and I need to start something. Great. That's me as a person. But now I have to like think about my team and how to increase productivity. And so how do we frame it through, multiple lenses? And it's just a super interesting, I think, moment we're in, both personally and how it's transforming us as professionals. Yes. And then, of course, like how it's really transforming a business or transforming the way teams operate or transforming efficiency measures.
Mm-hmm. It's such a great point because even as we at the Webbies talk to communities about AI, it is quite personal, right? I think everyone is figuring out, what makes sense for them. And I think certainly for all of you working with clients, everyone has a sort of different approach. One thing that has come up quite a bit though is I think a lot of people are wanting to make sure that they're keeping up, right? Keeping up with this new technology and figuring out how to scale. And, I'm curious, maybe Katie, I can ask you this. I mean, do you have any recommendations for clients who are wanting to keep up with this moment of time and wanting to scale and maybe are actually leading in this sort of AI-driven moment? Do you have any advice for them or sort of what have you told your clients who are wanting to really take steps forward?
Yeah, I think one thing we've been telling people is to stay open, and we tell ourselves this too, because I think I've heard so many people talk about it's like, be careful to not invest too heavily and go all in on one thing because every day there is something new. And so, and I think that's also a challenge to figure out how to balance that because, I'm sure all heard the stories where somebody has spent all this time building something that 2 weeks from now, something else comes out and everything that they just worked on is irrelevant in some ways, which is, horrible to hear. But so I think, our advice and what we are also doing is doing our own research to, again, make sure we're building the right foundation that can evolve and adapt and make sure we're thinking about it all the way around our business or our client's business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have maybe one or two questions left for the group, but I would definitely recommend if anyone on our chat here today has any questions for this great group of leaders, please drop them in the chat. We'll have a few minutes at the end for questions. But, I think as we do wrap up, I do want to look ahead a bit. I think we've talked a lot about scale and what it means to develop businesses or to work with clients that are really scaling. And I'm curious to ask if there is maybe a misconception about scale or AI, but sort of scale at large, that agencies, brands, creatives maybe need to let go of. What is something you're hearing from people about this idea of scale that maybe isn't holding true to how you all see it? Katie, I'm seeing some nodding there, so maybe you.
Yes, one of the things, because I feel like I've heard this from so many people, there is so much fear around all of it. Change is hard. And I think, there's this big misconception that it's going to completely replace people. And that is the thing I would encourage everyone to try to let go of. And in no way am I ignoring the fact that, yes, it is changing how we all work every day. But I keep thinking about how, just like every major shift in technology, yes, some roles will evolve. And yes, sadly, some go away. I mean, I think about typesetters, film developers that used to be careers that, yes, those did go away. However, what we also saw during those times is it created opportunities for new roles and evolutions and ways for those people to use their skills and talents and expertise in a different way. So I just encourage everybody it's not, I just don't believe it's going to ever replace people, because there are so many things, Maury, just like you were talking about with the chatbot, it's like you need people to still think through. It gives you a great base and a great starting point, but it's not the end all be all. We still need people that have, taste level, that have emotion, that have all these things that I just don't see that going away. So,
yeah. Amori, what about you? Any misconceptions?
I mean, I think the misconception starts from, myself and what we're saying, which is it's just going to make everything so easy and better. Yes, to a certain extent, but there's a very, very particular kind of problem that I think AI is just kind of magic at. And that's what I would call the cold start problem. Like, if you're a product person, you know what a cold start problem is, right? You're just presented with a blank page. And so there are things that are just amazingly great about AI that I think, like the cold start problem, it's like, hey, I have a blank page. I'm a content person. I need to write something, or I need to create something, right? So it's that fire starter that can be amazing, but you still need curation. You need language. You need great storytelling, right? That people are going to be better at. The other thing that I think that a myth that exists is that it can actually lift and shift something almost completely. I haven't actually seen that work. I'm interested to see it work, but I actually haven't seen something where you have X, whatever it is, right? And there is just, it's not a replacement for a person. It's like almost like it's a solution that almost fits well into the space where that problem existed. Let's say it's creating a model, right? I haven't seen those possibilities fully discovered.
Yeah.
Like when you think about the mobile phone, it was like a problem space, and then it got created and it fit the entire box. That's not where AI is right now, right? Yeah. So it's interruptive, it's transformative. I think it has huge possibilities, but I don't know how essential it's become, right? And I'm interested to see what it could go. So I think the myth of like something's magically better. And yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I'm seeing Cosme laugh. I imagine this resonates maybe in your fights with the models. But
yeah. It's it kind of goes down also to like the hype of it or the fear of it. It's kind of the same thing of like the unknown of it. I find it to be very AI not as smart as people give it credit. All the fights I realize it's just something simple. It's like, this is not working, and then they're like, yes, it is working. And just that simple exchange and trying to convince it that it's not working and it's being stubborn, it's just not as smart.
I love when you type or when something happens and it's like, oh, you're right, that is incorrect. And it's like, why did you give this to me?
Exactly. You got to constantly challenge it. It's not as smart. And I think starting to kind of like ground it more. It's like it's a computer, you know. At the end, it's a yes or no, you know, yes or no, 1-0, 1-0, and it's faster now,
Yeah.
but it's not, you know, thinking up of new ideas.
Yeah.
That's us.
Well, and listen, I think that we hear a lot this idea that vision comes from us, right? We are the vision leaders, and AI is this amazing tool to help us scale. It's an amazing tool to sort of help us grow. But you know, this is an interesting time. I'll sort of end on this question, which is, we've talked about misconceptions, but I'd actually really love to hear from each of you briefly about what excites you about this moment in time. You know, there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of really exciting stuff that's happening, while there is also a lot of skepticism and hype around AI. But just outside of that technology, what is exciting you about sort of this evolution of creativity meeting scalable growth? Because there is so much richness there. Amori, I'll start with you to kind of kick that off.
I mean, the biggest exciting thing for me is just like the possibilities for individuals.
Yeah.
Like, the internet was amazing. You could go there, you can find out more things that you needed to know. Like the way that people can become experts in a way, right, of deeply understanding information. I think that the possibilities for individuals is almost limitless. And I find that super exciting, because we don't live in a world that's completely fair or accessible or kind of available for all. So that idea of just information, all the promises of the internet now in a cleaner chat interface, like conversational interface, like all of the promises of the internet, right? Democratizing data, putting things at people's fingertips. So that's just incredibly exciting. But it's also like incredibly scary, because it is so easy to lose yourself in a world where it's not highly accurate, right? You kind of lose that quality of it. So I launched my first site like for Lysol in 2002. That was almost 25 years ago, right?
Wow.
It's like, I know, it's kind of sad. I'm going to say it out loud anyway. You know, and I just think about like building that site and like building this site now, and it's like the world has changed. It's just like my mind is blown with how different it is. But certain things are still the same, right? Which is people, individuals want amazing visceral experiences. They want to live fully in this world, right? And so I'm interested to see what AI means for that, which is how do people live an even more engaged life, period, right?
Yeah. Katie, any exciting words for the future?
Oh, man, I so agree with you that what it's unlocking for individuals, I think when it's used in the right way, it's unlocking almost a superpower. But it, you know, again, it still hinges on the person. But I also think, man, humans' creativity is an incredible and exciting thing. And I think we have not even begun to see the beginning of what it's truly going to unlock from a creativity standpoint. And, you know, like I was saying earlier, thinking about not being limited by time or budget or bandwidth, where it's all about people's imagination and what can you do with it. So I am really excited to see what people continue to do with it.
Oh, beautiful, really beautiful. And Cosme, take us home, and then we'll open it up for a question.
I think kind of also the same thing, like Amori, like going back to when I first did my first site, and why I even got into web development is just I was very curious about these interactions online and what it could be, like the possibilities. And so that was like a big moment for me, is like this curiosity. And I think now I'm kind of reliving that again with AI. It's a renewed curiosity of what can I do? You know, what's next? And that's what got me the most excited about it.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you all so much. I'd love to, you know, we got carried away with all your great insights, but we have a couple questions. I'd love to pull up one, and if any of you have an answer for it, we can start with a question from Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. Any specific ways the panelists have optimized their site content for AI search? Great question. And how are you tracking their GEO, AEO performance? Anyone want to take this? Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, well, I'm happy to take it.
Okay,
I mean, the first thing that we've been trying to do, like, let's start with the basics. Like, you have to have amazing structured data and schema markup, right? And so how are we actually thinking about building for it? So at the end of the day, GEO is not incredibly different because it's still like a technical practice. You're taking one surface and you're passing information successfully to another surface. It just happens to be different than SEO. But I think the fundamentals are some of the same. I think the big transformation of like optimizing our site, and I'm by no means an expert, so I won't give you advice, but what I will tell you is some of the things that need to be done, which is to make sure that you're also investing in content that is going to be read and picked up from that and having the ability to track it, right? So you hear this formulation called EAT, right? How do you have expert, really credible, authentic content that is being consumed? Structurally, you have to make that consumption easier, and it needs to have great data behind it, great taxonomies, all of those things. But the other thing is you have to produce it, right? And so that's the other big unlock, which is look at your content, produce it in a way that meets that bar.
Awesome. I think we have one other, and we'll sort of quickly have it answered before we are at time. Let's pull up one other. These websites are very visually striking and beautiful. I agree. They're Webby winning. Congrats. Could you speak more about the design process and the inspirations behind the visuals? Cosme, maybe I'll push that over to you as a designer and developer. Tell us a little bit more about the inspirations behind Gelato La Boca, which is truly such a beautiful, colorful, rich experience.
So the credit really goes all to like the branding team here at Matchbox, and then the branding team goes over to the digital designer, and then for me, it's really just kind of bring that to life. So there's always a couple of steps along the way, but it's really a lot of it goes to the digital designer and the branding team, and having such a bright, fun brand and site like that gives me inspiration to do more with the interactive part of it, the development part of it.
Yeah. Katie, anything you want to speak on in terms of the inspiration or sort of the creative behind the work that you did?
Sure. I'll say truly, yes, all the credit to our teams that worked on that. But I think everyone was inspired by these distilleries have all got incredible stories. And so that was such a big part of everything we were doing, is when that is somebody's first introduction to Kentucky, to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, to any one of these distilleries, how do we make that connection with people so that they have a better, again, understanding of the world that they can experience and what all it has to offer. So I think that inspired our team throughout the entire process.
Well, it was really felt. I mean, congratulations to you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to send a huge thanks to Amaury and our partners at WP Engine for their great support and care on this community. And to Katie and Cosme, thank you so much. What an amazing session. What a great series. Again, you can check out the full Code That Scales showcase from our Crafted with Code series on YouTube, which is linked in the chat. And a reminder, if you are creating standout digital experiences, and I know many of you are, it's been so fun to sort of see you in the chat and talking about this work. But we'd really love to see it this season at the Webbies. This is our 30th anniversary. So Amaury, 25 years, right there with us. We'd really love to see the work in celebration of our 30th anniversary. Our final entry deadline is December 19th. Again, that is December 19th, and we can't wait to see what you're all building. So thank you again. And until we meet again, we'll see you all on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.